Welcome to Last Dawn Stories channel. The day before the zombie outbreak, I was reborn. Rather than saving the world, I preferred to lie flat and mess around, so I abandoned my saintly best friend and headed alone to an island full of supplies. I'm the villainous female supporting character in the apocalypse, doing whatever it takes to survive, while my best friend is the perfect saintly heroine. After the zombie virus outbreak, I took her on a private plane, intending to fly to a deserted island to escape the danger. However, her saintly heart exploded, and she insisted on stopping the plane halfway to save people. As a result, our plane was hijacked, and so, we began our journey to escape. I started my evil life, doing whatever was necessary to survive, stealing food, refusing to open doors, and my sinful life began. But good people don't live long, and evil lingers for eternity. I perfectly avoided death until the end. And just as an antibody was developed, humanity regained hope. I thought I would return to my normal life, but my saintly best friend said I was too sinful and executed me on the spot. I should have just kicked her off the plane back then. I thought I was going to die, but then I was alive again. I returned to the day before the zombie virus outbreak, and without hesitation, I immediately instructed my assistant to arrange a private plane to the island. It's called an island, but it's more like an undeveloped tourist attraction. 3 years ago, I lost my parents, but I inherited a fortune worth billions. The island I'm going to was one of my father's tourism projects. After his death and 3 years of the pandemic, the project had been temporarily delayed. While the project was postponed, the island still had plenty of supplies. My mother was an apocalypse enthusiast, although the island was being developed as a tourist attraction. Right in the center of the island was a private residential area. My mother built a safe house there and stocked it with a warehouse full of rice and other food. My father spoiled her so much that he spent large amounts of money buying weapons and ammunition from the black market, and now, that safe house was mine. I might have been infected by Sarah's saintly heart, because as I was about to board the plane, I hesitated. There were still 22 hours before the zombie virus outbreak. I could still save the world in those 22 hours. However, I quickly dismissed this idea. Half a month before the zombie outbreak, someone had spoken out online, asking people to pay attention to the situation in Z City. Z City was the first city to be exposed to the zombie virus, but that person's voice was suppressed, and I had no power or influence, just a pile of useless money. What could I do? I couldn't save the world, and I knew it better than anyone, so my saintly heart was quickly extinguished. I boarded the private plane, but along with me were my mother's Burmese cat, Parrot, my father's Tibetan Mastiff, and Labrador. If I could save anything, it was only those creatures that posed no threat to me. The plane took off, and Sarah sent me a message. Jane, where are you? I came to your house to find you, but there's no one here. I just had a nightmare about zombies. I'm really scared right now. Zombies in her dream. Could it be that Sarah was also reborn? That would be bad. In the previous life, I had told her about the island when we boarded the plane. Afterward, we headed south to the island to avoid the danger, and we succeeded. She knows the location of the safe house, the code to the house, and everything about it. If she has been reborn, she'll likely escape to my island as well. What's worse, with her saintly heart, she might bring a whole boatload of people. My hands trembled. If Sarah really was reborn, my safety would be compromised. I typed quickly, "You watch too many zombie movies. Where would zombies come from in this world?" But Sarah didn't buy it. She said she found information online that Z City had zombies. I tried to comfort her, saying it was just a gimmick by some influencer to get attention, and that there were no zombies in the world. As for that blurry video, it was either acted out or showed rabid dogs. Before I could send the message, Sarah initiated a video call. I instinctively wanted to hang up, but just before I touched the screen, I hesitated. Sarah might really be reborn, and she could be testing me. If I refused the call, she would have a reason to suspect I was also reborn. After all, we were close friends, and there would be no reason for me to reject a video call unless something was wrong, so I decided to answer. On the other side of the video, Sarah was sitting in a car. She wore a white down jacket, and her flawless face showed a bit more anxiety. Her brows were tightly knitted, reflecting her current unease. As soon as the call connected, Sarah's eyes widened. Surprise, joy, panic, and fear all flashed across her face in an instant. I leaned back in my seat, casually yawning, and teased, "A single video scares you like this? Soon, the National Anti-Fraud app will be calling you. That's not just any video, it's real. Sarah raised her voice. I dreamt of it. We were on a plane, escaping. And then, she suddenly stopped. She stared at the screen intently, and after a while, she hissed like a wild cat, "You're on a plane right now, aren't you? Are you going to abandon me and go to the island alone? Are you crazy? What reincarnation? What island? Honestly, are you on drugs?" I rolled my eyes. "I told you not to get too close to those guys but you didn't listen, now you're on drugs." Sarah looked suspicious, studying my expression, trying to find any trace of reincarnation, but I could easily hide a whole box of chocolates while on the run, so acting was second nature to me. Besides, with Sarah's intelligence, there was no way she could see through my acting. As I expected, Sarah's doubts only lasted half a minute. In my calm demeanor, she gradually let go of her suspicions and began asking where I was going. Without missing a beat, I answered smoothly, "My uncle sent someone to take me to J Country." "My cousin's getting married." "Your cousin's getting married," Sarah murmured, "but that didn't happen last time." "What last time? What this time? Are you really on drugs?" I warned seriously. "If you are, I'll call the police on you," Sarah quickly explained. "I didn't take drugs. The dream felt so real. I think it's my past life." "Stop with the past life talk. If there were zombies, the government wouldn't just ignore it. Our country is so big. Even if there are zombies, it's only in one place. A machine gun would handle it. What's there to worry about?" "Then why did your uncle suddenly want to take you to J Country?" "It must be because it's unsafe here." "Why does everything lead back to zombies?" "My uncle just wants me to go to J Country. My cousin's getting married, and they want to get some money from me. If it weren't for the funeral of my grandfather, I wouldn't bother. I didn't have a good relationship with my uncle. When my parents passed away, he and my aunt had tried to grab my family's fortune. How could I be close to them? So, with my performance now, it was no different from how I acted before the apocalypse. My acting was flawless. As expected, Sarah's suspicions faded, but she asked a fatal question. "Do you have an island in the East Sea, and there's a safe house there?" I didn't expect that, but it had come full circle. She had gotten to the island. Still, as long as I could stall for time and reach the island first, I would have a chance. After all, there were even machine guns on the island. If Sarah's saintly heart took over and she brought a bunch of people to the island, I would just set up my machine guns at the entrance of the safe house. Of course, that was the worst-case scenario. I preferred to kill the danger in its cradle. The carefully drafted message was sent out. The assistant's reply helped me settle my nerves, and I focused on continuing the conversation with Sarah. "The island in East China," I frowned. "Are you talking about the Moon Bay Tourism and Retirement Resort Island?" "Yes, that's the one," Sarah asked excitedly. "Does that island have a safe house?" "What safe house?" "You know, the one your dad designed for your mom during the apocalypse. It's got guns, ammo, food, bottled water, and a backup generator." "Are you writing a novel or something?" I rolled my eyes at the screen. "Guns and ammo. Do you think my dad is a general or something?" Sarah opened her mouth to say something but stopped. She stared at the screen, her face once again filled with suspicion and doubt. Was she questioning my words, or was she doubting her own memories? I didn't know, but I could tell she was lost in confusion. She and I had both gone through the apocalypse. From fleeing to killing and finally establishing a base, those painful experiences felt like they had happened only yesterday, but when we opened our eyes, everything had returned to the moment before the tragedy began. The bustling streets, the noisy crowds, and the terrifying zombies had vanished, replaced by a peaceful world devoid of any crisis. When I first woke up, I couldn't help but wonder if the apocalypse had been just a nightmare. But then the news of Steven's disappearance came through on my phone. He was my father's adopted son and hadn't appeared much since my father's death. Although we didn't communicate often, he had named me the heir to my father's massive pharmaceutical empire, a revelation that shocked me. In my previous life, it was to celebrate this unexpected inheritance that I invited Sarah out for a celebration. On that wild night, I received a mysterious text: "The zombie virus has leaked, run." At the time, I didn't take the message seriously until the violent event at the club happened. Bloody scenes unfolded right in front of me, and it was then that I believed the text. The zombie virus was real. Before the police took the witnesses to the station, I used my privileges to escape with Sarah. We should have made it to the island and sheltered there, but Sarah insisted on stopping the plane in Z City to rescue more people. The Z City flight had been suspended, and the private plane had become the only hope for those people. the crowd rushed forward, and many died trying to board the plane, but I couldn't stop it. My hands were tied, and I lost my voice. The consequences of the plane's chaos fell squarely on me. Fortunately, an accident occurred. Sarah's kindness didn't bring any gratitude from the people she saved. The mere mention of the private plane stirred the crowd's anger. Sarah and I quickly became targets of their wrath. And even the crew members who had once sided with us switched allegiances. In the last minute before takeoff, we were mercilessly thrown off the plane. If it had been my usual self, I would have parted ways with Sarah right then, but the hardships of surviving alone, coupled with her sincere apology, made me reconsider, and I forgave her. However, the rift in our friendship had already formed. Our differing values led to constant arguments during our escape. She would risk everything to save injured people, even harboring dangerous criminals. I, on the other hand, became a hindrance in her mission, epitomizing selfishness and evil. In the end, when I was forced to kill Leo, Sarah stood against me without hesitation. She declared me guilty of all my sins and sentenced me to death. The deafening sound of gunfire still echoed in my ears, but I didn't want to waste time on revenge. Surviving was my true goal after being reborn. I didn't avoid Sarah's piercing gaze but instead looked confidently into the camera. The moment I saw her on the video call, I knew I couldn't dispel her belief in the apocalypse. I didn't think I could convince her to give up on the island. Seeing her remain silent, I decided to end the call, but Sarah interrupted, her expression softening. She looked at the screen with deep affection. "Jane, no matter what, I'll always be your best friend. I hope you'll be okay, and live well." I didn't understand why Sarah had suddenly changed her tone, but that wouldn't stop her from trying to kill me. After all, she had already convinced herself that I was a selfish villain who had lost all morals and boundaries, the most toxic person in the apocalypse. When the apocalypse struck again, she wouldn't hesitate to shoot me, but I would never give her the chance. I didn't respond to her parting words and instead kept my eyes fixed on the screen. A faint honking sound came from Sarah's side of the call. I smiled slightly at Sarah. "I'm just going abroad, not going anywhere dangerous. Why are you acting like this?" Sarah didn't reply, but her face wore an expression of regret, her eyes full of pity. I thought that maybe she didn't suspect I had been reborn. She probably believed everything I had said and felt sorry for me, thinking I was naively running off to J country to die. After all, the zombie virus would break out there too. And as a person of color, surviving in J country would be far harder than escaping in our country. Sarah withdrew her pitying gaze. The bond of our friendship had long dissipated under the pressure of the apocalypse. Perhaps Sarah wasn't pitying me, but the naive and sweet person I used to be, the one who had given her endless benefits. My actions during the apocalypse had left her utterly disappointed in me. She said her goodbyes and was about to hang up when the car she was in suddenly came to a sharp stop. A long, screeching honk came from her phone, and the shaky video showed an ambulance from a psychiatric hospital blocking her car. Several men in white uniforms with steel forks jumped out of the ambulance. "Driver, what's going on?" Sarah asked, but before she could get an answer, the driver quickly jumped out of the car. As she was still in shock, one of the attendants tried to open her car door. Sarah clung to the door, but the other side had already been opened by someone else. Just as they were about to drag her out of the car, she pulled out a kitchen knife from somewhere and waved it frantically in the air. A long steel fork reached in from outside, trapping her inside the car. A rubber baton ruthlessly struck her wrist, making her release the knife. A man then took the opportunity to rush in and subdue her. "What are you doing? I'm not a psychiatric patient. This is illegal. Jane, did you set this up?" "I knew it. You're the one who's behind this, you heartless woman. You want to trap me in a mental hospital. After everything, I even thought of calling you. But how could you do this to me?" Sarah screamed in despair, struggling helplessly as her thin hands searched desperately for an escape, but her efforts were in vain. A tranquilizer shot rendered her completely motionless. I watched helplessly as they dragged Sarah into the ambulance without stopping her. As I looked at my phone, the message from my assistant remained in the notification bar. He had been so efficient, finishing everything in just 10 minutes, but his high-profile style might attract attention from onlookers. Luckily, the driver who fled started narrating the situation. "You guys have no idea how scary that woman was. She was terrified out of her mind. She kept saying zombies were coming, telling me not to care about the red lights and to drive faster. I knew something was wrong with her. If I hadn't seen the kitchen knife in her bag, I would have kicked her out of the car. I think she's just obsessed with her phone." the driver went on analyzing the situation, criticizing the modern youth's addiction to smartphones while cursing Sarah's family for almost causing his death. I found the conversation dull and was about to end the call, but one remark from the attendant made my previously relaxed nerves tense again. "This is the third patient this month claiming they've been reborn. Do you think there really could be zombies? Does it matter if there are zombies? Aren't we all like zombies now? Work, 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 and we still can't afford a house. Honestly, we might as well be zombies. At least we wouldn't have to worry about work or anxiety." The video call was abruptly cut off by the caregivers, but my emotions remained unsettled. There were more people who had been reborn, not just the two of us. In my past life, Sarah had marked the island's location on the way while fleeing, stating that there were plenty of supplies and safety guarantees on the island. I scorned this behavior, believing it would only lead to disaster, but Sarah thought otherwise. She believed we might not be able to reach the island safely, and leaving the island's information could provide hope for other survivors. It was the only thing we could do for humanity during the apocalypse. Now, I don't know how many people have been reborn, nor do I know if those who have come back saw the markings Sarah left, but I couldn't gamble on it. From the outbreak of the zombie virus to our arrival on the island, I knew better than anyone that zombies themselves weren't the real threat. What was truly terrifying were the people who used the cover of zombies to commit murder and violence. They would wield knives and sticks under the pretense of exterminating zombies, enjoying the thrill of violence, and then push the blame onto the zombies. Leo, whom I killed in my past life, was one of their accomplices. In my previous life, when Sarah reached the island, she didn't let go of her savior complex. She suggested sending groups to search for survivors during the apocalypse. The loud actions and abundant ammunition caught the attention of those people. They set their sights on the island, purposely sending people disguised as survivors in groups to investigate, planning to join forces from both inside and outside to wipe us out. During one of the expeditions, I discovered Leo communicating with the outside world and learned of their plan. They didn't yet know the structure of the safe house, but one of their team members, a locksmith who had previously opened bank vaults, along with explosives stolen from the police station, made them confident they could handle the safe house without trouble. Instead of a direct assault, they preferred to outsmart us. They planned to pour the zombie virus into the island's food and water supply. I intended to warn the others, but Leo and his accomplices discovered me. In the ensuing fight, I was seriously injured. My vocal cords slashed, and one of my eyes was gouged out. But I managed to bite Leo's accomplice and killed Leo in the process. The loud gunshot drew the attention of the other members of the expedition. Leo's accomplices, seeing that I couldn't speak, twisted the truth, claiming that Leo and I had argued, and in a fit of rage, I killed him. Having old grudges with Leo, Sarah and the others didn't give me a chance to explain and sentenced me to death on the spot. Because I was sentenced to death, I didn't reveal Leo's true intentions. If we were all to die, then we would die together. The people who had their sights set on the island might also have been reborn. They weren't as foolish as Sarah, nor were they as easy to deal with, so I decided to prepare myself for the worst, entering a state of readiness for the apocalypse well before reaching the safe house. I shaved my long hair into a short buzz cut to avoid it being grabbed during a fight. Then, using a nail clipper, I made my 10 fingernails serrated. If I had better tools, would have sharpened all my teeth to gain an advantage in close combat, using my hands, feet, and mouth simultaneously. Of course, the most important thing was checking my gear. Before heading to the airport, I searched through my house's storage room. My mom's homemade emergency kit had only expired medications and some compressed biscuits, but I found a bulletproof vest, knee pads, knuckle dusters, a collapsible baton, and a knife in my dad's toolbox. I put on the bulletproof vest and knee pads, stuffed the knife into my boot, and wore a loose jacket over it. Apart from looking a bit bulky, it didn't seem out of place. As for the knuckle dusters and baton, I had used them during the apocalypse, but I wasn't proficient. To improve my survival chances, I watched online tutorials and learned a few moves. Just as I finished, the plane landed. Since there was no airport on the island and I feared the crew would spot me, I decided to fly to the nearest city, H-City, then take a yacht to the island, which would take about an hour and a half. The journey wouldn't be safe. Just as I was about to leave the airport, I heard an alarm sound from a nearby passerby's phone. The alarm rang for 15 seconds, paused for 10 seconds, rang for 5 seconds, and paused again for 10 seconds, repeating this pattern for 2 minutes. It was a disaster alert. No regular online video would feature such a sound as background music, so the only possibility was that the city had issued a disaster alert and a citizen had filmed it and posted it on social media. I turned to look at the passerby, who stood frozen in shock, while another person's phone broadcasted a news report at 3 a.m. on December 13, Kyoto time. Z City issued a disaster alert. Armed forces are rushing to Z City to provide support. Reports indicate that the virus was deliberately released by foreign forces. In the first 18 hours after the zombie virus outbreak, the country had already taken action. My phone vibrated with a few text messages. National Health Commission reminds, the new virus should not be taken lightly. If you experience symptoms such as fever, fear of water, dry eyes, difficulty breathing, vomiting, or headaches, please report them and isolate yourself. H City People's Government requests individuals who have traveled to Z City or G City in the past 30 days to report themselves for self-isolation. Please cooperate with the control measures, obey the law, and avoid panic. I opened Twitter and saw a flood of trending topics related to the zombie virus, Z City, and armed suppression. Within half a minute, they had completely dominated the page. The top trending topic was about the progress in developing a zombie virus antibody drug. Unlike previous trends, the videos under this topic didn't just feature the usual news content. Instead, they covered other updates related to the zombie virus. The top leader had delivered a speech announcing that epidemic control measures were being reinstated. Detailed information about the zombie virus was shared, with the overall situation in our country being under control. Z City and G City had been fully quarantined, and the northern provinces were sending material support. Several cities had entered emergency status, and contact tracing was actively underway. Someone had interfered with the original course of this world. Perhaps this time, the zombie virus wouldn't fully erupt, but I wasn't willing to gamble on that. I just wanted to hide on the island and ensure my safety. In my previous life, my city had been hit by the zombie virus, however. I hadn't seen any news about the outbreak in City A, which meant that whether the virus had leaked from City A was still unknown. If news of the virus leaking from City A came out, the only thing waiting for me would likely be forced quarantine. If I was forced into a hotel quarantine, the danger would be much greater than it was now. I might have to go through another life or death escape, so I needed to speed up and leave the airport. Heading straight for the harbor before the situation and policies changed, just as I was about to get into the car, a familiar face caught my eye. It was Leo, the Leo the first had killed in my previous life. I quickly got into the car, hiding behind the passenger seat to observe him. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot, and he was hastily dragging a suitcase as he rushed out of the airport. In his hurry, he accidentally knocked into an elderly woman, who was about 60 years old. If it had been anyone else, they might have been intimidated by the murderous look and hostility in Leo's eyes, but this woman wasn't scared. "You young man, you just knock someone over and want to walk away like that?" The old lady lay on the ground and grabbed his pant leg. "Don't you have eyes, or a mouth? Can't even say sorry, get lost." Leo yanked his pant leg out of her grasp, his rough movement enraging the old lady. She got up and grabbed his hair, threatening to give him a lesson on how to behave for his parents. During their scuffle, I noticed a stain on Leo's sleeve. It looked like blood, though it could have been ketchup. However, as Leo pushed the woman away, I saw a wound on his arm, small, but it seemed like something had bitten him. I recalled my previous encounters with Leo. We had met him in H City, and his accent revealed he was from the north. He had claimed that his wife and child had been infected by the zombie virus. He often talked about how much he missed his wife, about their many years together, and how he risked his life to take care of his wife who had turned into a zombie. He tried hard to present a romantic image, with his wedding ring as a symbol of his love and photos of his family in his wallet, but I never trusted him. The animalistic look in his eyes and his lecherous expressions had made me feel disgusted from the first time I met him. He would often subconsciously take off his ring, and the mark on his finger had almost faded. The most important thing was that I had killed a female zombie in Z City while scavenging supplies. Her face had been smashed, but I remembered 5 small black moles on her neck and the style of the ring on her finger. These details matched the wife in Leo's photos. When I killed her, I had sensed something was different about her. She moved slowly and didn't attack others. Instead, she seemed to harbor malice towards the photos in the room. Unconsciously tearing at them, as I killed her, she was still mumbling that someone was going to kill her. Her brain had been infected by the virus, so she couldn't clearly say Leo's name, but the room where she had been trapped was filled with twisted blood-written words. Leo's name. I had shared my suspicions with others, but Leo denied being from Z City, plus, Sarah and the others, who had already sensed my hostility towards Leo, thought I was just trying to drive him out as a survivor. Z City, the zombie wife, Leo's early arrival in H City, a security guard's shout pulled me back to reality. I looked up and saw that Leo had managed to break free from the old lady's grip and hurriedly hopped into a taxi, speeding away. I noted the license plate number and asked the driver to follow him closely but not too closely. I didn't want to reveal myself before Leo was captured. Less than 5 minutes later, I heard the sharp, urgent sound of a siren. A police car whizzed past us. And as it stopped the taxi, my car was just passing by. I turned back and saw Leo trying to escape, but he was quickly pinned to the ground by the police. I clearly saw his expression. He was starting to drool uncontrollably and instinctively tried to bite the officer. It seemed that he had indeed been infected by the zombie virus. Now, Leo wouldn't be a threat to my plans for the island. I felt relieved and instructed the driver to speed up toward the harbor. In less than 4 hours, I had dealt with 2 pests, but the one I feared the most had yet to show up. That person was George, the fugitive Sarah had saved. George, though a murderer and drug dealer, had been softened by Sarah's kindness during the apocalypse. He had risked his life to save Sarah again and again, given his feelings for her. If he had been reborn, he would certainly come after her again. I could only pray that George had not been reborn. The heavens do not always align with one's wishes, and George truly came after me. As I was approaching the island on my yacht, a sudden yacht appeared out of nowhere and crashed straight into mine. The yacht rocked violently, and both the Tibetan Mastiff and the Labrador started barking furiously. I steadied myself, quickly drew my dagger, and warily looked outside. A tall figure jumped aboard, none other than George. "Where's Sarah?" George glanced around. "Why is it just you? How would I know? Maybe she's still in City A." I mocked him. "In my last life, she killed me. What, does she expect me to keep taking care of her?" I calmly answered George's question, revealing myself as a reborn person. After all, the fact that we were meeting here could only mean one thing. If I acted clueless now, it would only make things more obvious. Revealing my true identity, he squinted his eyes, clearly not believing my story. "Did she not come, or did you make sure she didn't come? Which is more important, survival or revenge?" I countered. "I'm not going to waste time on grudges. One can survive and get revenge at the same time." George sneered. "You and I are alike. Neither of us are good people. I've already had my revenge. The island is gone in the end, isn't it?" I smiled sweetly. "Since you're back. Sarah must have had a pretty bad end in the last life." George stopped talking. He twisted his wrist, and the cracking of his joints filled the cockpit. It was his warm-up before killing someone. He clearly wasn't planning on letting me live. Luckily, George couldn't kill me right away because he didn't know the weapons locker code. Seeing the Tibetan Mastiff baring its teeth and eager to pounce, George stopped approaching me and instead tried to play the emotional card. He said he was going to City A to take Sarah, and all I had to do was give him Sarah's location and weapons. As for the island, he didn't plan to come back because the island might not be safe. Men's mouths are full of lies. If the island were really unsafe, would he stay away? He simply wanted me to drop my guard so he could get the weapons and kill me afterward. I saw through his scheme, but continued to play along. "Helping you rescue her is your business. Why should I help you? Maybe she didn't come back and doesn't even recognize you." I secretly glanced at the phone on the table and slowly leaned toward it. George noticed my movement and naturally guessed I would see through his plan. He knew me well enough to understand that even if I died, I would make someone else go down with me. Once I got the phone, I would find a way to destroy it so he'd lose contact with Sarah completely. As I pretended to reach for the phone, he lunged at me. He tried to grab the phone, but in doing so, his neck was exposed within my strike range. I raised my left hand, quickly and precisely slashing my knife across his neck, but his reflexes were faster than mine. The knife only grazed him, and he grabbed my wrist, forcibly dislocating my arm. As he raised his fist to strike my face, the Tibetan Mastiff leaped and tackled him. "Bite him to death," I commanded, and the man and the dog began to struggle. George was pinned under the Tibetan Mastiff, unable to move. His right hand firmly gripped by the dog's teeth. Blood poured onto the deck, and the sound of bone breaking mixed with George's screams, but compared to zombies devouring people, this scene wasn't bloody at all. For some reason, I found the scene strangely familiar. A flash of memory passed through my mind, as if after being executed by gunfire, I had inexplicably turned into a zombie, but unlike the other mindless undead, I had a clear purpose: to find Sarah and the others, and kill them. I had reached the dock, boarded the yacht, even refueled it, and with a fierce determination, moved toward the back of the island to bide my time. Could I have contracted the zombie virus too? Maybe it was related to the iron spike that blinded me. The virus spreads through bodily fluids, and if the spike had zombie blood on it, I could have been infected. But before I delved into the mystery of how I turned into a zombie in the previous life, dealing with George was the priority. I turned to look at George, like an unkillable cockroach. Even with his right hand almost bitten off by the dog, he still endured the intense pain and stabbed at the dog with his left hand. Seeing this, I kicked the weapon out of his hand, stepped on his wrist, and prepared to give him another slash to the neck when the sound of a gunshot froze me in place. The sound of bullets piercing flesh echoed in my ears, and I even felt the bullets whiz past me, one shot, then another. As a police car fired twice from behind me, my right hand, holding the knife, trembled slightly, but the two bullets didn't hit me. I turned to look at the Tibetan Mastiff beside me, only to see it collapse heavily on George, its head hanging low. Police, don't move. When I was executed in my previous life, why wasn't anyone shouting, police? George and I were both taken to the island by the police, but the handcuffs weren't on me, they were on George. Once we reached the shore, I saw Riley in military uniform. In my past life, she hadn't revealed much about herself, but I had suspected she wasn't just an ordinary person. Seeing her in uniform didn't surprise me at all. Compared to Sarah, I trusted her more. After all, she had saved me twice and had stood behind me when I confronted Sarah, when the island base was being established. Sarah had proposed joint governance to prevent a dictatorship. In theory, it sounded like joint governance, but in reality, it was an attempt to force me to hand over control of the safe house. On our escape journey, I had told Sarah the password to the safe house, but that password only unlocked the upper villa of the safe house. It couldn't open the underground safe house beneath it. The underground safe house contained multiple layers. The first and second levels were for basic living, stocked with rice, compressed biscuits, canned goods, bottled water, and a variety of USB drives with movies. The third level was a medical storage room, containing medicines, medical equipment, medical books, and even a sterile operating room. The fourth level was a weapons locker, filled with everything from ancient bows and knives to modern firearms and explosives. The fifth level was a seed storage room, storing seeds for various crops and flowers, along with planting techniques and cooking lessons on USB drives and books. Once we landed on the island, Sarah naturally discovered that the password I had given her could not unlock the real safe house. When she questioned me, I repeatedly promised I would fairly distribute the supplies, but her trust in me had already evaporated. She believed I would use the resources of the safe house to suppress other members of the island. Some members, fearing I might hoard the supplies, demanded I hand over the password. I had considered hiding in the safe house, letting them waste away outside, but this plan wasn't feasible. The resources outside were enough to sustain them for a while, and the island had livestock and unoccupied stores with food from the safe house. Although the food was close to expiry, it could still last for a while. I couldn't hide in the safe house forever, and I certainly needed help to plant crops and raise livestock. Moreover, there were doctors among the island's members, and they were irreplaceable. Finally, after Riley intervened, I handed over the password. Of course, I only gave her access to the first 3 levels, and the administrator permissions for changing the password remained in my hands. As a condition, Sarah and the others were not allowed to live in the safe house but in ordinary residences. The weapons locker, being part of the safe house, couldn't be controlled solely by me, but I couldn't give the password to Sarah or anyone else I wasn't familiar with. Despite their leadership abilities, after careful consideration, I gave the password to Riley. She had the highest influence on the island and was neither too close nor too distant from me. Riley agreed to my arrangement but insisted on moving into the safe house to rotate shifts with me to ensure the weapon's security. I never expected Riley to be the unexpected variable in my plans. While others sought refuge on the island to escape, Riley had directly led a group to empty out the island. Looking around, I saw a dozen soldiers carrying boxes onto the ship. I recognized those boxes immediately. They were the ones containing arms from the weaponry vault. I had intended to wave at Riley, as in my memory, We had just met yesterday and were on good terms, but seeing the officers and the crates of heavy weapons, I abandoned the idea of greeting her warmly. Instead, I turned into a disgruntled, unreasonable rich air. I yelled at the police officer who had killed my Tibetan Mastiff, "Where's your boss? You killed my Strong. Is there any justice in that? Is there no law in this world?" The officer turned pale and nervously looked at a slightly older officer. Before the other officer could speak, I interrupted and shouted again, "What's going on here? Who authorized you to board my island? This is my private property, and you're trespassing." At that moment, Riley heard the commotion and walked over. She acted as though she didn't know me and explained matter-of-factly, "Miss Jane, the police applied for a search warrant, the situation was urgent, and since we couldn't contact you, we had no choice but to board the island first." "What urgent situation, and who gave you the right to move my things?" I retorted. Riley waved her hand, signaling the officers to step away. She glanced at George in the distance and said, "The police received a tip-off that drug dealer George was active in this area." "Well, a search is a search, but that doesn't give you the right to just take things from my island," I shot back. Riley smirked and whispered, "Do you still not know what's in those crates?" I opened my mouth in shock. "What do you mean? How could military items be on my island?" Riley continued, "From what I understand, your company stopped developing this island 3 years ago." She stroked her chin. "It seems High placed these items here during that time." I nodded in agreement. "I can't believe an escaped criminal was hiding so many illegal items on my island. Not discovering them sooner was certainly my fault, although George was to blame. Without those valuable assets, I would have been in grave danger staying on the island. What if the people who targeted the island in my previous life returned to steal it after my rebirth? How would I fight them off? With forks or scissors?" I took out my phone and checked the current news. Quickly analyzing the situation in my mind, I deduced the following. First, the city most affected by the zombie virus had been sealed off, and armed units were stationed there. If the virus grew uncontrollable, the government would likely resort to unconventional methods. Second, other major cities that had experienced outbreaks had already captured the poison-spreading spies. This meant the situation was still under control. Finally, no matter how safe a place was, it would never be as secure as the place where the authorities lived. I lowered my voice and asked, "Miss Riley, is the military compound you live in really that empty? Why, how about moving my food supplies to the military compound?" I gave her a flattering smile. With the current pandemic, I should donate supplies to contribute. If possible, I could even use half of my family assets to purchase military protection. After all, the remaining half would be more than enough for me to squander, especially since Stephen's inheritance had not yet been transferred. But the real question was, who was responsible for replacing the supplies in the safe house? At first, I had thought it was my diligent assistant who had been managing the supplies for the safe house. But he didn't know the password. Moreover, after my rebirth, I asked him, and he told me he hadn't handled the island's matters for a long time. Could it have been Stephen? I had no idea where Stephen was, nor did I know anything about his company, but the more important thing now wasn't finding Stephen, it was figuring out how to get into the military compound, ideally, the one in Kyoto. Riley knew what I was thinking and mentioned at the military plan to requisition my island. Naturally, the supplies on the island were also part of the requisition. In her words, everything in the safe house was illegally obtained, and I was supposed to cooperate with their actions. She didn't elaborate on why they were requisitioning the island, but I had a rough idea. It was most likely related to the zombie virus. As for my personal safety, Riley offered for me to stay in a military family compound in Kyoto, posing as her younger sister. With this condition, I agreed to hand over the island. Before we parted ways, Riley asked for Sarah's contact information and inquired about Stephen's whereabouts. I didn't know where Stephen had gone, nor did I know anything about his business. As for Sarah, I truthfully told her that Sarah was locked up in a mental hospital. Riley didn't say much more, and after getting the name of the hospital, she left. I wasn't sure what Riley intended to do, but when we left the island and headed to City H, a nondescript ship appeared on the horizon. There were soldiers guarding it, and a man in a white lab coat stood at the bow, taking in the view. He wore gold-rimmed glasses, and his familiar silhouette made me take a second look. It was the doctor from the island base. I glanced toward the ship's cabin and saw Leo running out, only to be knocked unconscious by the arriving soldiers. The doctor on the deck turned and looked at me. I casually glanced back at him, offering no expression, just a brief glance, as if I had seen a stranger. The two ships crossed paths, heading in different directions. Aside from Riley, I wouldn't mention my rebirth to anyone. I would tell others that I came to the island after learning about the crisis in City Z. I wouldn't ask about the island situation or inquire about Sarah, Leo, George, or anyone else. As for Steven, he remained out of contact. Months later, after a brutal crackdown, the virus control measures were concluded, but it came at the cost of millions of lives. This so-called zombie virus and the human cleansing plan were jointly exposed by multiple countries. During the press conference, I saw Steven, who had been missing for days. He presented accounts and videos, accusing Country J of crimes. The zombie virus was, in fact, a meticulously planned murder. Country J had spread the virus to multiple countries and provided military weapons to spies, orchestrating terrorist events to reduce the Earth's population. Steven said a lot, but my gaze remained on the scar on the back of his hand. Fragments of memories flooded my mind. It seemed that after I was executed, my body gradually cooled, but my mind kept working. A man appeared in my field of vision, and he injected an unknown liquid into me. The scar on the back of his hand was identical to Steven's. Rumors online had flashed through my mind. It was said that the zombie virus could bring people back to life. Was this true? If so, the zombie virus might never truly end. Human greed would ensure its eternal existence. And as for me, the reborn one, am I really safe? That's all the story. What do you think of this story? Share with me in the comments section. What would you do if you were in this situation? Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.